in these restored prayer practices, we mentioned when we were talking about prostration, then you mentioned sometimes you're not even using words. And there's this idea.
Which reminded me of the thing I was going to say.
Okay.
We're going to talk about the noose a little bit.
There's this notion like that people seem to have that there's a prayer without words that's better than the prayer where Jesus will talk about using your many words and thinking that you'll be heard because of your many words. And it does give this impression like if you can strip those words away, then there's something that's richer than all of that. But how to access that? How do you get to this point of that sacred prayer without words?
Right.
Well, bow down before God.
Yeah.
Then it's not that hard to be in that place.
Yeah. Well,
if you're just going to sit there and bow your head and just say okay, here I am in a prayer with no words. I think it's just a lot easier again. Get down on the floor.
Right.
And then you can be in that place. You're not. I think you're receiving from God when you're prostrated before God, but you're not asking. You're not trying to pull some favors or something. What you're trying to do is find the right place for you in the universe. Put yourself properly beneath God. And to me that seems like that's the goal of that. I don't know if I should say the goal, but that's part of the experience of that prayer of prostration is, look, I'm not asking for anything. I'm just trying to put myself in the place that I'm supposed to be.
Right. So I spent some time among Buddhist monks, not with the goal of learning to be a Buddhist or anything like that. But in Buddhism, for Buddhist monks, it's their whole goal is to learn to meditate without thoughts, which is there is a good principle there. Even if they're doing it for the wrong reasons, they're misguided in the practice.
Well, you find very similar things in Christian.
Yeah, and I know, and I'm bringing out the example of Buddhism because I think most people are aware that this is what Buddhists are trying to do. And the reason I bring that up also is that Buddhists over the thousands of years have developed all of these techniques to try to silence the mind, to try to get rid of the chaos of thought that's keeping you from meditating. Now in Christianity, you're after something different. You're not after silence. You're after contemplation and also hearing God. It's Buddhists are not trying to hear anything. They're trying to be in a state just free of thought. And my experience has been that none of them ever actually accomplish it.
Yeah, right.
They say somebody who does is enlightened and then just kind of stops being.
Yeah.
That's, I know, a little bit of a maybe unfair paraphrase, but anyway, just the point being, there's all these people all over the world in all these different religions. I think there's something similar in Hinduism. They're after this thoughtless meditation. And for us as Christians, I think oftentimes there's this same thing at work. We're trying to figure out how can we do the same thing that Buddhists are doing and sit there and not think. And I almost want to say that's a misguided approach in some ways, at least. That what we're not after actually silent prayer without words isn't actually prayer without thought or prayer without any of the mind at work. What we're really after, like I mentioned, is the nous, which I don't know, that's kind of a hard word. That's a Greek word. It's in the Bible, and you'll find it a lot in Greek Christian writings, throughout the history of the church. It's kind of hard to pin it down in English exactly what it means. One way somebody might describe it is the heart of the mind, or some might call it the receptive intellect. But it's the nous is the part of you that speaks to God. If you know anything about like neuroscience, you can think of the nous as being like really similar to it's at the right hemisphere of the brain, which is like the listening part of the brain. It's like that's like religion exists in the right hemisphere of the brain. It's like what I'm saying is like there's actually, I would say, a physical reflection of the spiritual reality. Like you have your part of your mind, your left brain, that is really rational, analytical, breaks things down into concepts and ideas, and you have this other part that is receptive.
And you could say like in most of the ways that people talk about prayer, we're talking about a left brain sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like, all right, I mean, even just the idea of like, we'll take everybody's prayer requests and then we'll make a list of prayer requests and then we'll systematically go through the list one item at a time until we reach the end of it. I mean, like it's just a very analytical, systematic, rational approach to things.
Yeah, and borrowing from my knowledge of Ian McGilchrist, I would suggest that if you have this idea that prayer is only this mental prayer of going through all these steps and praying all of these things, then your left brain has tyrannical control over you.
Yeah,
and
right.
You're like your mental state is deeply unstable.
Yeah. I think another thing with the like make the list of prayer requests, it does frame the idea that prayer is about taking your petitions to God. And I mean I deliberately use that phrase just to highlight that this is a biblical idea of prayer. But if that's the way that you are approaching it, then the idea, I mentioned like, you will find Protestants who will say that praise of God is part of your prayer.
Right.
But you're not going to praise God when you're going through an item by item list of prayer requests. Like the prayer request list it is blind to that. And so the thing that you're practicing regularly in the church, what's that?
I said, Aaron's not getting in on this.
The thing that you're practicing in the church becomes a model for prayer, and it's all about, it's these things that you can understand with your mind. It's these things that you can like push toward God. Like, all right, here's the things. Now take care of them.
Yeah.
And that receptive part of the self is not present in it.
Well, that is something that has always bothered me, of that, for me growing up, that's all the prayer meeting was on a Wednesday night was, God, here are these different things we're pushing towards you, take care of them. Now let's go home and have some ice cream or something like that.
Right. Right.
Yeah. But there's no like coming into the sanctuary and being fed from the altar.
Right. And it's always been that idea for me too, is that, well, there has to be more to prayer than just this, because someone could just look at that and say, well, what kind of God is that? Like somebody could easily just sit and say to me, well, you're just praying to that wall over there or something like that. There's nothing real to that.
Yeah.
And so all that a lot of people are left with is to try to rationally make the case for their God.
Yeah.
And it doesn't work very well.